Wireless LAN Weekly, episode 49.
Welcome to the Wireless LAN Weekly podcast,
bringing together the valuable knowledge of WLAN industry experts, news, and the latest technology developments, tools, and best practices.
a place to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire.
Here is your host,
WLAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher,
Keith Parsons.
We're glad you took the opportunity to join us with Wireless LAN Weekly. This is Keith Parsons, your host, and this is episode number 49. In today's episode, we'll be talking about Hotspot 2.0 with Dave Wright. He'll be sharing with us a little input about where Hotspot 2.0 is and where it's going in the future. Our tutorial topic is we're going to talk a little bit about what to do before and after you're installing APs. A little list there of what we can go over on tests and troubleshooting you can do. Because the earlier you troubleshoot your wire, the better your wireless troubleshooting is going to be. And then finally we have a Who Is section with Heather Williams. Stay tuned, listen up, and enjoy the show.
a word for the WLAN Geek Dictionary.
Radius. By the way, this is always spelled with all caps. Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service. An authentication, authorization, and accounting protocol, or AAA, for applications such as network access or IP mobility. Realize that it has the dial-in user service in there. This has been around a very long time, since we were dialing into all of our internet networks.
Wireless LAN Weekly Podcast, your source of education, information, entertainment, and inspiration.
Hello, I'm here today with Dave Wright of Ruckless Wireless. We're going to have a little discussion about Hotspot 2.0. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Keith.
We happen to be at the Ruckus Big Dogs event, and you just got done doing a presentation on Hotspot 2.0. And I thought our audience would like to hear about what's the past, present, and future of Hotspot 2.0, or Hotspot in general.
Great. Well, we just wrapped up the inaugural Service Provider Big Dogs, and we're getting ready to kick off Enterprise. And as you mentioned, I just finished up a session on Hotspot 2.0 and really looking at what the future of the technology is. So we've done a lot in the last 12 months, or I guess it's really more 14 months since the initial Passpoint certification launched from the WFA. That was June of 2012. And so we started off, and Dave Stevenson, who is the chairman of the Hotspot 2.0 Technical Task Group within the Wi-Fi Alliance, was here. And he and some of our customers presented on their perspectives on what's gone on during that time frame. And I did a quick recap of it as well. And if you look at it, the equipment support has been there really since soon after the launch of the certification. All the major players in carrier Wi-Fi anyways have been supporting Release 1 and have had the Passpoint certification probably for at least the last 9 months or so. We have had it on Zone Director and on some of our Zone Flex access points really, again, since last summer. And then it was just a few weeks ago that we announced that the SCG is certified for Release 1 as well. So the WLAN equipment support is there. What's really been lacking is the client support.
Well, before we get to client support, you want to back up and do a little history of where this came from, the 802.11 committees and how it went from the committee to the WFA and what brought us to this point before we move into the future.
Okay. History. Yes. So there's a lot of that. There've been various initiatives at cellular WLAN interworking over the years, right? Some of it's originated within 3GPP with the interworking IWLAN, interworking WLAN initiatives out of 3GPP. And then, let's see.
I want to come back and describe what 3GPP is for people who don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm making a lot of assumptions here.
You live in this world, and then not all wireless LAN folks live in that interface between 3G and Wi-Fi.
All right. So let's see. It's sort of just a question of how far back do we back up. But to answer the question about 3GPP, 3GPP is the 3G Partnership Project, and it originally came together as essentially a consortium of cellular operators who were very interested in promoting the GSM standards as a global standard. And so they came back together, I think it was late 90s, if I'm not too far off on that, to come up with basically just standards for interoperability, standards for bands, and since then, with every sort of major release of GSM technology, and then that leading into some of the different 3G technologies and LTE, 3GPP has sort of taken the lead on standardizing those. And again, they had an initiative called IWLAN. It was probably in the 2005 timeframe, I think, is when IWLAN first appeared. And that was a proposal for interworking WLANs with cellular. And it included, doing IPsec on the phones and doing dual stack mobile IPv6 and all these sorts of things. So the device support really never came around with IWLAN, but that was a proposal. And so because of some of the sort of stalled efforts, I would say IEEE took up the mantle, and out of that, let's see, when did 802.11u get actually standardized? I'm thinking it was the fall of 11, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, I think that was when 802.11u got standardized. And then based on that work, that provided, so 802.11u, I mean, I get really excited about 802.11u. I was just actually saying,
there's a lot of us that get excited about protocols, so nothing wrong with that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that grace. As I was saying in my presentation, there's a lot of people who are interested in making Wi-Fi faster and making Wi-Fi cheaper, and those are noble efforts, and I get excited about AC and everything else. But what excites me about you is I think it's sort of going back and revisiting how Wi-Fi works, and it's really a fresh take on the information that gets exchanged between the client and the AP, prior to the association decisions, and I'm excited to see what other services beyond Hotspot 2.0, 802.11u and ANQP will potentially enable. There have been a few precursor examples of that, but I think it's sort of a Pandora's box in terms of what might be possible.
Where would you send someone if they wanted to get a better understanding of 802.11u without actually reading the protocol?
Well, Marcus Burton and I were gluttons for punishment, so we try to get through those specs. If you don't want to read through the spec on you, I would actually recommend Marcus's white paper. Trying to be vendor neutral here a little bit. I think Marcus has got a white paper called How Interworking Works. That's available on the Ruckus website,
and I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well.
The other one, and again, being vendor neutral here, I would say Aruba put out a really good white paper. I mean, it kind of covers Hotspot 2.0 but it goes through 802.11u and ANQP as well. I think Peter Thornycroft was the author there, and that was an excellent paper as well. So I'd recommend both of those.
Good. So that a little history. There's 802.11. The IEEE got involved. Where are we now?
Okay, we got 802.11u again, and then the WFA picked that up and basically started saying, well, okay, this is good, but 802.11u specified a few information elements in ANQP that would be used for Hotspot 2.0 selection and things like that, but it needed to be extended a little bit in order to make it more full-featured. So that's where the WFA came in with originally the Hotspot 2.0 technical program, and the idea was to use 11u and ANQP as a foundational technology and then extend it just practically, okay, so how do we use this to actually communicate? What do we need to communicate to the client? And then how does the client actually utilize that information to authenticate to the network? What protocols are we going to use? What EAP methods are we going to support? And that was really the domain of the WFA. And they published that technical spec, came out last summer. I believe that was June of 12, if I'm not mistaken. And then the PassPoint certification launched soon after that.
Any inside hints on why they called it PassPoint of all things?
I have no idea. No, I mean, I
don't think anyone does. It was one of those dartboard things, I think. Yeah,
we tend to. I mean, and it is a problem. I mean, I don't think there's any beating around it. Even now people get just confused by the difference between Hotspot 2.0, which is really the technical spec is the Hotspot 2.0 technical spec, but the certification program is the PassPoint certification program. And yeah, you'd have to talk with them about that.
All right. So we have, you mentioned most of the enterprise vendors have Hotspot 2.0 and the infrastructure side. Where are we with the clients?
Right. So that's where there's been a tremendous amount of activity in the last, call it 6 months with client support. And that's really what was missing. So for most of the last year, it was great because we had all the equipment, but we didn't really have much to do with it. And now with Samsung launching the Galaxy S4, and that would have been the sort of March, April timeframe of this year, that was the first commercially available handset that supported Hotspot 2.0 and Passpoint, and that's been great. And we've been testing that a lot, and a lot of our operator customers have been testing that, and it's just great to have a device to work with. But as significantly, or arguably more significantly, was the launch of iOS 7 here a couple of weeks ago. Because with iOS 7, Apple is now supporting Hotspot 2.0 on a large percentage of the devices that can be upgraded to iOS 7.
So how far back to 4s or 4Ss?
Right now, they're supporting the 5, 5S, 5C, then the iPad Mini, the the new iPad / iPad Retina / iPad 3, and then the 5th generation iPod Touches are supporting.
And basically everything that also supports 5 gig.
Yes, that's a good point. I guess I hadn't actually thought of it that way, but yes, it is all the 5 gig capable devices. So that's the current support, and we'll just have to wait and see if they push it back any further. They may go back further on devices.
So if you were thinking from the wireless side, not from the 3G, the infrastructure side, if you're just a wireless provider at a hospital, hospitality, what kind of pieces do you need in place in order for Hotspot 2.0 to run in your environment?
Yeah, so essentially all you need is a wireless LAN, obviously, that supports the protocols. So you need a more recent generation APN controller infrastructure from one of the vendors who's supporting Passpoint, and then, or is Passpoint certified. And then really the only thing else you need is a AAA infrastructure. So, this relies on TLS or TTLS if we're not doing SIM credentials, which I'm assuming we wouldn't be.
Anything specific? Any radius-based system work, or is it?
A lot of the testing that I'm seeing is people using FreeRadius. But I know other people are, I believe, still belted radius and
or Microsoft
or Microsoft as well. So, yeah. And then it's a matter of do you want to push down a cert, or do you want to integrate with an SQL database for username password authentication. I mean, if I was a hospitality, I'd want some APIs to integrate into my loyalty programs and things like that. So
good. And then let's get the more difficult question. That's the local. If we're talking to service providers, you've been meeting with service providers this week. What do they need to do on their infrastructure? I'm assuming it's a little more complex.
Well, I mean, it's complex. Most of that complexity is probably, I think, on the business side in terms of the the business arrangements that will make sense for people. But from a technical perspective, it's essentially radius realm routing. So we're getting credentials submitted to us as a hotspot operator, and if we are advertising that we will authenticate those credentials against some home provider, then that means that there's obviously a way for us to route that credential back to that home provider. So it's really a matter of you've got a local AAA at the hotspot, and we see the credential come in because again we're advertising that we support the credential for some foreign operator, and then based on the realm that the credential represents, we're routing we're doing proxy routing to that home realm.
Any constraints on a hotspot provider that can they work with multiple backends that they can all be supporting? My example would be in the States we have something cable Wi-Fi with a lot of cable operators work together for a single SSID. Can Hotspot 2.0 take that cable Wi-Fi but then also split it back and send it over to Cox or Time Warner?
Right, absolutely, yeah. So I think I got the question of can you use a single SSID to represent multiple operators?
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. I mean that's one of the that's one of the things that we're excited about with Hotspot 2.0 is that, we hope it will cut down on some of the SSID proliferation that's out there now. So yes, it doesn't even need to be the cable Wi-Fi SSID. It could just be, your hotspot SSID essentially. And what you do is you define there's basically 3 different kinds of identifiers that you can use to notify the clients of which authentication providers are reachable via your hotspot. And those are NAI Realm, so this is an FQDN type of formatted name. So, I could have on my hotspot SSID, I would say I support the timewarner.com realm, and I support the cox.com realm, and any other NAI realms that you wanted to support or you were providing authentication services for. And then you can also use what are called PLMN IDs. So this is more for mobile operators. Every mobile operator in the world has a public LAN mobile network ID. And it's essentially using a mobile country code, which is a 3-digit code, and a mobile network code, which is a 3-digit code. And Hotspot 2.0 supports advertising the authentication provider using their PLMN ID. So for AT&T, for instance, I would say I support authentication of credentials, of SIM credentials that have a PLMN of 310.410. 310 is the U.S. country code, 410 is AT&T's network code. And that way my phone knows, I've got a SIM that's got an IMSI that starts with 310 and 410, so that means I can authenticate using this network.
And all against an SSID that is not ATT.
Oh, yeah, right. The SSID is irrelevant now, really. It can be any SSID.
Love it. What about, in the past, a lot of onboarding was you would hit an open SSID, pass some credentials, drop the open, and move to a WPA2. I'm assuming we've addressed that as well.
Right. So yes, so some of this I'm going to have to be a little general in some of the descriptions, because that's the realm of credential provisioning and onboarding is really what the Release 2 of Hotspot 2.0 is going to address. Let's see, I want to address that, but I want to also make sure I address the Apple configuration options, because that's sort of that's another really interesting development here recently with iOS 7. But in terms of Release 2 with onboarding, one of the issues is how do I get a credential to the device, and then how do I manage the credential? And the Wi-Fi Alliance has taken that up with this upcoming release of Hotspot 2.0, which will probably be out in the first half of next year. And the idea, as you sort of described it, it leverages a lot of sort of the BYOD mechanisms that are out there. So the idea, but this is very different, is we're going to utilize the 802.11u and ANQP elements to let a client know. So a Hotspot 2.0 Release 2 client will be able to learn pre-association that I don't have a credential that's valid on any of the Hotspot 2.0 networks that I'm in range of, and yet I see that I can sign up for service to a authentication provider, and that'll be communicated to the client using, again, 11u and ANQP pre-association. There'll be a pop-up notification on the client basically saying here are some online sign-up providers that are available. And if the user then clicks on one of those OSU providers, that will connect them, to your point. It will actually, at that point, they were not even associated prior to this, but at that point, it will tell them, if you'd like to register for service, connect to this WLAN, and then go to a URL which will take them back to an online sign-up portal where they'll put in their information. But in terms of that registration WLAN, that will be actually a WPA2 encrypted WLAN, and there'll be some new, I'm not going to go into specifics, but there'll be some new capabilities that are being introduced by the Wi-Fi Alliance with Release 2 that'll allow you to do that, including some a new EAP method and ways to make for the client to make sure that the WLAN is authenticated as well as the online sign-up server.
You're such a tease. Everyone wants to know the details, but obviously it brought up a lot of questions, and you can't answer the questions right now. But stay tuned.
Yeah, there's a lot more exciting stuff coming. If you got another minute, I'd love to tell you about the Apple
please
configuration capabilities, because that has been an issue up till now. Is conversations I've had with operators, it's been, okay, even now that we've got the Samsung devices and whatnot, how do I get a credential onto the device, and then how do I manage that credential? And the Galaxy S4, you could just enable Passpoint and use eSIM. So if you were a mobile operator, that was viable. Simply enable Passpoint and the device will do eSIM. It'll derive the PLMN ID that I was talking about and the domain name and the realm from the SIM. So that was great. But if you wanted to do TLS or TTLS, or you wanted to do any sort of parameters around the credential, you had to manually touch the device. You had to essentially define a text file and load it onto the device. So that's obviously not scalable, not a viable operator solution. So the tack that Apple has taken, I talked a little bit about Release 2 of Hotspot 2.0 and how the Wi-Fi Alliance is going, and that's going to be sort of a broad industry approach. And the good news is that with Release 2, you've got support from all the WLAN vendors. You've got support from a lot of the handset vendors. You've got the chipset producers there, and they've all been involved in the tech spec, and they're involved in the trials that are going on right now to test the tech spec. So that's Release 2, and then we've got the Apple solution. And Apple is, they're going to leverage their mobile configuration profile architecture that's already been in place for some time. And, people have been using that to configure all sorts of things on iOS devices for, any number of years. You can use it in BYOD environments to push down an EAP credential that, will get you onto your enterprise network securely. You can also use those to do APN settings for cellular networks and things like that. And what Apple is doing is they said, well, we're just going to use that infrastructure. So you can now create a Apple iOS mobile config profile that includes the Hotspot 2.0 credential, and with the Apple Configurator Utility 1.4, that allows you to do it. If you're familiar with the ACU or the iPhone utility, either one of them, there was an area to define the Wi-Fi payload. And if you go into that area now, under the network type options, one of the types is Hotspot 2.0. And when you select that, then you can select your EAP types and then create or define the parameters for that credential.
Yay, clients are coming on board.
Clients are coming on board, and they're getting provisioned. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate your time in talking to us today about Hotspot 2.0. Anything you'd like to leave as a final note?
No, I would say that people really need to, they need to be paying attention to the technology. I really feel like, it is the future of wireless in many ways. I mean, there's so much, and I'm not, this is probably more of a public Wi-Fi than an enterprise Wi-Fi perspective, but there's just so much Wi-Fi coming online now in the public domain. The retail deployments and the municipal deployments, and you just can't turn around. I mean, we just announced, or we didn't announce, pardon me, there was just an announcement the day before yesterday that the Cable Wi-Fi Alliance just hit 200,000 hotspots across their members. So there's just a lot of public Wi-Fi out there. The issue is getting people on it, especially retail and things like that. Is it really worth the hassle of going through the T's and C's or the portal to get on the network if I'm just going to be in the venue for a few minutes or whatnot? So, for that venue owner, getting people on the network is very important, so that they can, then potentially market to them and watch what they're doing and just have a relationship with a customer. And Hotspot 2.0 does that. So I would really encourage your listeners to pay attention to the technology. Now that iOS 7 is supporting it, there are a lot of devices that are out there. Our equipment supports it. Other vendors' equipment supports it. It's not hard to set up. And then just, get a free radio server running on a VM, and you can start playing around with the technology. And we've got some, I actually just did a video tutorial that hopefully will be available soon that takes you, step by step through how to set it up on our gear.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. And hopefully people will follow your advice. And Hotspot 2.0 is the future. It's coming. That cycle of getting a client associated, we've been using stuff since, late 90s? We've been doing the whole association cycle. That's good that we're moving forward, finding some new ways to do that.
Right. And then again, look for other uses for pre-association, communication from the network to the client. Because I think once people see the potential, there's going to be a lot of really interesting innovation around this.
Great. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Back to basics with Keith.
In our basics tutorial today, we'll be talking about some steps in a checklist. And the checklist is on the WLAN Pros website if you want to go download a PDF version, or there's an HTML version there as well. It's the checklist of what to do before and after an access point installation. So this is kind of a process you might want to follow. We've used this to train cable installers, wireless installers for a long time. Now, the reason we're starting with the wired side is I've seen too many times if the wired side's somehow misconfigured or broken, you install an AP. Later, what happens is if there's any issues to troubleshoot it, they try to go back and troubleshoot the AP. They think it's a wireless problem when really it was a wired problem all along. But troubleshooting wireless is much harder to do. So if we can make sure the wired side is correct before we start the wireless, it'll save you a lot of headaches later on. So let's work through these. First, before you install the access point, you have a cable. There's a Cat5, Cat5e with an RJ45 sitting there, and you're just about ready to put it into the AP. Stop, and before you do, run through these tests. I use a Fluke Link Runner AT for doing these tests, but you could use whatever tools you have. The reason I choose the Link Runner AT because it does all the tests from one quick handheld device. Some of the tests that I'm going to tell you about are more difficult if you're just using a laptop or something. So first, check the cable. It has to meet Cat5e or better specs. We need to be under 90 meters. We need to make sure that all the pinouts and twist ratios and all of those things meet the spec. Hopefully your cable installers are already speccing and validating their cable pulls as you get to there. Next, you need to confirm that 1 gig connection is working and it's in full duplex mode. Just because the cable can do 1 gig, it was spec'd out at Cat5e, maybe it's not on the switch port or the switch port's not configured. So actually do a gig connection test to make sure you're meeting that gig requirement. Next, we need to make sure the PoE is providing enough power to meet the requirements of the AP. Some APs need 802.3 AF, some need PoE Plus or maybe 802.3 AT. Some APs, if you don't give it enough power, they turn off certain features. So know what your feature set should be, design to it, and measure it before you put the AP there. One of the things I like about the Link Runner is it actually does a PoE draw and doesn't just senses their PoE there, but it draws the current to make sure that there's enough there to do it. Next, let's confirm DHCP, DNS, IP subnet mask, default gateway. Not only are they working, but are they the correct ones? Sometimes you get things connected up and it's working and you go, that's great. And then later we come back and find out that it was on the wrong subnet or the gateway was connected in an incorrect place. So as part of your documentation, make sure not only are they there, but they're connected correctly. Document up which switch port, which switch you're connected to. And you could use LLDP or something to find out the exact port that you're on. Test DNS to make sure that the DNS is resolving the names correctly, specifically the ones you're going to be using from the AP, perhaps the controller, etc. Ping the default gateway, the one that you got from the DHCP, to make sure that the DHCP configuration wasn't wrong. And then ping on the far side of the default gateway to make sure the gateway's up and the router functions are going. Confirm that you can connect to or ping the controller or the management server, whatever. If you're running AeroHive, you want to be able to hit to the Hive Manager, etc. And then you'll also want to go through and make sure what VLANs are available on that port. Now, depending on your wireless design, you may or may not need the port to be an access or a trunk port or to have certain VLANs assigned. Whatever is supposed to be there, make sure it's currently there. Is the management VLAN assigned and available and running? Well, now you finished all the wired side. It met everything you needed. It is documented and proved that it is exactly the way it was supposed to be. Now, we can finally plug in the AP. As we're plugging in the AP, document the AP's MAC address, its assigned name, its location, its orientation, the switch port it's supposed to be on, its IP address, etc. Make sure it's oriented the way it was supposed to be and at the correct location. And then you might need to wait a little bit until the AP receives configuration from the controller. When it's up and running, now you can listen in the air for the SSIDs. There should be whatever SSIDs were configured in the profile for that AP at that location. Are they in the air? And then use a client to associate to each one of those individual SSIDs and test. Are you getting on the right VLAN? Are you getting in the right IP address pool? So test the client side as well as the AP side. And there you go. If you have the wired side working, the wireless side is working, and it's all tested, your future troubleshooting will be much better because you'll have a documented, proven wired connection and proven wireless connection before the installer leaves the site. Thanks for listening.
This is the Power Minute with today's podcast special guest.
WHOIs LAN Weekly Podcast. WhoIs interview, Heather Williams. Heather, tell us about yourself, name, where you work.
I'm Heather Williams, and I am Ruckus Wireless's global trainer. I train our partners, VARs, and disties.
What's a distie?
Distributors.
Okay, good. How did you get into the IT industry?
I got into the IT industry by accident. I have a degree in liberal arts, which means that I can communicate, but I don't have anything to say. I was just lucky is the way it happened. I began working at a university, and that translated into being a lab technician, which translated into being a LAN technician, which translated into working on at Nortel as a technical instructor.
Then on to where you are here. So what was your first computer?
That's going to date me. A Commodore 64 with a tape drive. It took 30 minutes to load Frogger after school.
And then you played.
And then you played Frogger.
So if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you tell her?
My 1984 self, I'd say buy Apple. But on a more practical level, I'd say relax and don't take some things too seriously and never bet against yourself.
What's your opinion on degrees and education in the wireless LAN industry?
Wireless LAN and IT in general, I find more self-taught, self-made professionals. It's the most forgiving in terms of degrees. I find people who got their education in the military, or frankly, some of the best IT professionals were not successful in traditional schools at all. And maybe we're just a weird lot.
But how about certifications then?
Certifications are a completely different thing. I think that you need to have something that verifies or demonstrates your knowledge and degree of proficiency. I don't know that formal college educations are the same thing anymore.
Okay. What's your recommendation for someone new in the wireless industry? What kind of path should they take to get ahead?
Well, my recommendation to any young person in IT is to go Wi-Fi. We don't go west anymore, we go Wi-Fi. I'm actually a huge fan of the CWNP products, just as study guides, pure and simple. But then at some point you have to get out of the classroom and get any kind of hands-on and practical experience.
Coming from the practical experience side, do you have a home lab? If so, what's in it?
Yes, I have a home lab. It has actually a variety of wireless and wired products. I actually still have a lot of old Nortel wireless products, Symbol, Trapeze. Obviously, I have a lot of Ruckus products. I have some Netgear switches and a Catalyst because the only place to put Cisco is in the wired closet.
So, social media, has it helped or hurt, or do you use it at all?
You know, my kids will tell you that I'm not cool enough to use social media. I've tried, and I dabble, and I'm more of a lurker than anything else.
So, you listen but don't talk?
Quite frequently.
Okay. Mac or PC?
Mac or PC? Both. I am slowly becoming assimilated, and I had to go full assimilation and to find my Mac usable. But I find now that there are times when I'm a big believer that the proper tool at the proper time. So there are times when one is better than the other.
Any influential people in your career in IT to getting you where you are today?
My husband. My husband was a huge influence. We actually were both technical instructors at Nortel together, and he's the smartest guy I know. And also, he operates at layer 7, so I married up the OSI layer.
Nicely said.
He's my server guy.
What inspires you to get up in the morning?
I love my job. I absolutely love my job. First of all, when I get up in the morning, there's a fair to middling chance that I might not know what country I'm in. Actually, I've started leaving the windows open so that I can look out and make a guess. But I get to meet wireless professionals all over the world and hear their stories and share solutions with them, and that's just a lot of fun.
So if money were no object, what would you be doing?
I'd be doing this job for free.
Very good. Nice answer. What did you do in the last week?
Last week, for fun or for work?
Both.
Well, 3 weeks ago, I was diving with dolphins in Mauritius for my day off. Last week, I was in a training class in Singapore. This week, I'm in a training class in Bangkok.
Kind of tells us about what your life is over the last little bit. Where are you from originally?
I was born in D.C. Not a lot of people can say that, but I was actually born in a hospital in D.C. But I grew up in Texas. I spent most of my summers in the north.
North as in?
But by Texas standards, Virginia is the north.
Oh, okay. Final question. If you were talking to a youngster just getting into the wireless LAN industry, what advice would you share with them?
For young people getting into the job, I would tell them to get as much practical and hands-on experience as they can in as wide a variety of ways as they can, and to read as extensively as they can, and to start working on certifications, both wired and wireless. The wired side is neglected too often by wireless people.
Well, thanks, Heather, for coming on and sharing a little bit of your life and experience with us, and tell us who is Heather Williams. Thanks.
Wireless LAN Weekly Podcast, your source of education, information, entertainment, and inspiration.
Thanks for listening in on episode 49 of Wireless LAN Weekly. We learned a little bit about Hotspot 2.0 with Dave Wright. Went through a little checklist of what to do when you before, during, and after an AP installation. And finally, we found out who is Heather Williams. Thanks for joining us. We're glad that you're coming back week after week and listening to the show. If there's any additional things you'd like to see on the podcast, changes, updates, whatever, go ahead and leave a message at feedback@wirelesslanprofessionals.com. Thank you, and we'll have another episode for you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Wireless LAN Weekly Podcast.
Head to WLANpros.com for this episode's show notes and the latest industry news.
Connect today, WLANpros.com.
A place to educate, inform,